Hey guys, it's Shirley. I'm back with another GMAT video. You've probably heard that the GMAT has changed a lot recently, so in this video we'll deep dive how to prep for and ace the new GMAT Focus. In this video we'll talk about the format of the new GMAT Focus exam and how to prepare for it. I'll also discuss how I personally went about increasing my score. And lastly, I'll give you some general tips, especially in preparing for the new data insights section. Okay, so in case you haven't heard, the GMAT has undergone some major changes. As of late 2023, the GMAT is now shorter and there are some major changes to the question types and the overall format, so let's discuss. There are a couple new sections that are going to be added. There's a data insight section now. That's going to replace the integrated reasoning section. Data sufficiency questions used to be in the quant section. They're now going to be in the data insight section. And these questions combine verbal and quant reasoning skills by asking you to analyze charts, graphs, and tables. There are also some sections that are going away. As mentioned, the integrated reasoning section, that's now gone. Sentence correction as a question type is also gone from the verbal section now. Geometry questions are getting removed from the quant section. And lastly, the analytical writing assessment, the essay, is now also going away. So the new GMAT structure is going to look like this. There will be the verbal section, 23 questions, 45 minutes. There's a quant section, which has 21 questions. You also have 45 minutes. The data insight section will have 20 questions and also 45 minutes. And of course, you have your optional break, which you can take after your first or second section for a maximum of 10 minutes. And as always, you can always choose the order in which you want to take the sections. With this new GMAT format, which is called GMAT Focus, it's really important to use high quality prep materials that are adapted specifically for the GMAT Focus. That's why I'm really excited to talk about Magoosh. A large part of the struggle of getting used to taking the GMAT is really just getting used to an adaptive test that always adapts to your ability level. So I think taking practice exams is key. I actually have a free GMAT practice test for you. It's linked in the description below. This GMAT practice test will give you accurate score prediction and a subject-by-subject performance breakdown. Again, you can check out the link in the description. This Magoosh practice test lets you do a single section like data insights, math, or verbal for 45 minutes, or you can take the whole assessment test for 2 hours and 15 minutes. And did I mention that it's completely free? Magoosh has helped millions of students prep for the GMAT, and they're fully updated for the new GMAT Focus. They also have an unbeatable price in test prep. They're a quarter of the price of competitors. They also offer a score improvement guarantee, up to 70 points score guarantee, or your money back. Their test prep includes over 800 questions, full-length exams, and over 200 video lessons. There's also smart feedback. They'll also help you track your performance so you can really hone in on your weaknesses and turn those into your strengths. You get email access whenever you're stuck, and you can take Magoosh with you anywhere, anytime using mobile apps or a desktop. Now let's talk about what I did in order to prep for the GMAT. This is how I improved my score from a 690 to a 750 without using any expensive prep courses. The first time I sat for the GMAT, the proctor actually messed up and didn't notice when I ran out of scratch paper. So I wasn't able to finish, I think it was the quant section in time. That was also my first section, so needless to say, that left me feeling very flustered and I couldn't finish the rest of the exam in the right state of mind. I was already just stressed thinking about my performance on the quant section. So because it was the proctor's fault, GMAT offered to let me take the GMAT again for a second time, which also gave me some more time to prep for the exam. People always ask me how long it took me to study for the GMAT, and it's honestly hard for me to say because the first time I took the GMAT, I probably studied for 3 months and I dedicated a lot of time to that. The second time I took the GMAT, I really didn't need as much study. And maybe there's something to be said for long-term memory because I'd already studied for the GMAT in the first round, and I had a period of, I can't remember how many months, maybe 3 to 4 months before I had to take it again. So I think all of the studying that I'd done in the past, I just kind of retained in my long-term memory so that when it came time for me to take the exam again, I really didn't need to study as extensively. I remember the second time around, I definitely did not study as much. I would kind of review some practice questions, especially the things that I was weak in after work, but it was not a consistent study schedule my second time around. I'd already become really familiar with the format of the exam and the question types. There are some question types on the GMAT that you're just not used to seeing, like data sufficiency questions, and really just the experience of taking a computer adaptive test. That all is pretty new, I think, to anyone, but once you get comfortable taking an exam like that, it becomes less intimidating. So the second time around, I didn't feel like I needed to study quite as much. I knew what my weaknesses were, so I focused on those, but I didn't need to spend time just getting familiarized with data sufficiency questions or really just how the GMAT works as a test. I had relied on a bunch of different prep materials and I took a lot of practice exams. The GMAT just isn't like any other test since it continually adapts to your performance, which means the better you do, the harder it gets. And I think that's really what makes the GMAT so challenging, because it basically means you'll always be pressed for time. You're always going to be getting questions that are kind of at your skill level or above. So it's really important to just get used to taking an adaptive test just to get familiarized with the experience, because it's definitely challenging. It literally adjusts to you, so it will always be challenging to you. If you want to learn more about what I did to prep, I actually already have a whole video on that already, which I'll link here. So that's what I personally did to prepare for the GMAT, but here are just some good general tips to prepare for each section on the GMAT. So first up, let's talk about the new data insight section. This section tests your quant-based and verbal-based reasoning in 5 parts. There's multi-source reasoning, which will make up about 10 to 20% of the questions. There's also table analysis, which is another 10 and 20%. There's graphics interpretation, which will take about 20 to 30% of the questions. There's 2-part analysis questions, which will be another 10 to 20%. And lastly, we have data sufficiency questions, which will take up the remaining 20 to 40% of the questions. Here's how to prep for this section. You should know the question formats by heart. Data insights questions can be, and in fact are meant to be, overwhelming. So by knowing the formats in advance, you can set yourself up for success. My next tip is to really prepare yourself for very strict time management. I think the pacing of the GMAT is really one of the hardest aspects of the exam, and you should know that you don't get any partial credit for questions in the data insights section. Furthermore, many of the 20 questions actually have multiple parts to them. So for example, if you miss one part of a 3-point question, you get 0 points for that question. So it's really important to prep with time to practice. That is key to mastering the data insights pacing challenges. My next tip is to really just get into an executive mindset. And by that, I mean executive function, not like business executive. What I mean by this is skills like choosing priorities, evaluating benefits and liabilities, and coming up with strategies. You can practice this by reading materials like the Wall Street Journal and The Economist to read and review different types of analyses. And lastly, I would say work on your visual literacy. Charts and graphs are extremely important in the GMAT integrated reasoning section. And again, the Wall Street Journal and The Economist can be really helpful here. Make sure that you work on not only breaking down the parts of a graph, but also on understanding and analyzing them in context. Alright, that wraps up my tips for acing the GMAT Focus. If you think I missed anything, or if you have any tips or questions, please leave them in the comments below. And again, if you're interested in learning more about how I raised my score from a 690 to a 750, I already have a video on that. I also have some other videos on my personal admissions journey and my overall MBA experience. You can find those all in my channel in my MBA playlist.